I was diagnosed with Hashimoto thyroiditis, Lyme disease, ulcerative colitis. There's nothing like 3 major diagnoses to make you even more interested in health and how the body works. But there was a massive piece of my health and vitality that was missing. And that's where quantum biology came in. What quantum biology is it's the study of the flow of electrons or protons, photons of light or phonons from sound, and how they interact in the body.
So I am very excited to chat with Dr. Catherine Clinton. We're going to be talking about quantum biology.
We were all taught in school, in medical schools across the globe, that we are chemical mechanical beings, right? And so disease comes from a chemical imbalance or a mechanical misalignment. We have this key randomly bumping around the cell until it finds its receptor, unlocks the receptor, and biological action happens. And that's where quantum biology comes into play.
How big a role did it play in overcoming Hashimoto's and overcoming ulcerative colitis and Lyme disease?
That's a good question.
So I am very excited to chat with Dr. Catherine Clinton. We're going to be talking about quantum biology, and really it's going to be a very interesting, even a fascinating conversation. I predict at least it's going to be a fascinating conversation. So let me give Dr. Catherine's a brief but sweet bio. So Dr. Catherine Clinton, a licensed naturopathic physician, has spent over 16 years helping people overcome their health issues. Dr. Catherine has learned how our quantum biological system is intimately and inseparably connected to the world around us. And welcome, Dr. Catherine.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk with you. Hope I can live up to the fascinating part.
Yeah, I think it will be. I mean, before I press record, I told you I listened to some of your other episodes and just really found, at least I found it fascinating. So, and I think most of the audience will as well. But let's give a little bit more of your background. I appreciate a short bio, but I want to learn a little bit more about you. And for those who are not familiar with you, how did you get to where you are right now, focusing on quantum biological systems?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm, like the bio says, I'm a licensed naturopathic physician here in Oregon, and it was my second year of school, and I became really ill. I was diagnosed with Hashimoto thyroiditis, Lyme disease, ulcerative colitis. It was sort of that proverbial straw that broke the camel's back, the stress of being in medical school, long hours, sort of that initiation year of second year. And I was in the perfect place to receive those diagnoses. I was right down the hill from a progressive allopathic medical school, an MD teaching school. I was in naturopathic school. I was across the river from acupuncture school. So I had so many tools at my fingertips, which allowed me to put the pieces of my health back together and become productive again, go back to school, be in clinic shifts. But there was a massive piece of my health and vitality that was missing. And that's where quantum biology came in. I was doing clinical rotations with a physician who was actually my physician. And she urged me to look at psychoneuroimmunology. And that's just a big word for how our thoughts and emotions impact our health. And at the same time, I was looking at mitochondrial research because it was like the latest, greatest thing at the time. This was like 20 years ago. And I came across a research article from Martin Picard looking at how our state of mind influences the energy production in our cells, right? Our mitochondria are those little organelles inside of a cell that make energy. And it just blew my mind. And at the same time, I was looking at some of the early quantum biology research out of the UC Berkeley, where they were looking at how a photon of light gets to a photoreactive center in a photosynthetic bacteria, how photosynthesis occurs, right? And they were finding all these quantum mechanics. They found that that photon could take multiple different paths because it's a quantum particle. It could tunnel through obstacles that in classic physics we don't have, right? Quantum tunneling. But the thing that really stood out to me is that the proteins in this bacterium would vibrate and oscillate at a certain rate in coherence with each other to keep that photon on its fastest path. There was this knowing and this collective action in that cell, and it just blew my mind. And I was looking at heart coherence as a way to regulate my own emotions for my own health. And it just sort of opened the door to this incredible world of quantum biology. And I've been fascinated ever since.
You learned all this while still in naturopathic school? I mean, obviously it's evolved over time, but like you first got introduced to quantum biology while you were still in school?
Yeah, absolutely. There's nothing like 3 major diagnoses to make you even more interested in health and how the body works, right? So yes, that's what I was doing. And I had extended my schooling because I had gotten sick. So I had extended it. And the last year of school, I had a lot of time where I couldn't see patients because I had met my quota and wasn't allowed to take patient visits from other students, right? And I spent that time researching.
All right, awesome. So I'm sure a lot of people listen to this are familiar with quantum physics. So how does that differ? What's the difference between quantum physics and quantum biology? If you could maybe dive a little bit deeper into it.
Yeah, absolutely. So quantum physics, when people are researching quantum physics, scientists, they research that in a lab. It's conducted in a lab that's near absolute zero, right? Where no life can exist. It's shielded from any heat, any noise, any vibration. And they're looking at quantum mechanics. They're looking at quantum tunneling, this idea that a quantum particle like an electron or a proton or a photon of light, like we were just talking about, can go through an obstacle of distance or energy, or it can take multiple paths at one time, or it can be entangled with another quantum particle, even though they're far away from each other, right? They can still depend on each other. They can still have this relationship as if they're close, but really they're separated by a big distance. Quantum coherence, the idea that many things can act together as one to create this backdrop for these quantum mechanical actions to happen. But quantum biology is this new and emerging field, and the new research came out, about 20 years ago in the early 2000s, showing that it's not just a laboratory shielded from all these things, but living systems also create a beautiful backdrop for these quantum phenomenon to happen. And really what quantum biology is it's the study of the flow of electrons or protons, photons of light or phonons from sound, and how they interact in the body. And the more we look at it and the more we learn from the research, we start to understand that our body can really act as receivers, and this incredible water that is in the body can also act as this liquid crystal structure, really able to pick up on this frequency information of light, sound, frequency of fields, of electrical fields, magnetic, electromagnetic fields. And it extends our idea of how the body works, right? We were all taught in school, I'm sure you were, it's still being taught in medical schools across the globe, that we are chemical mechanical beings, right? And so disease comes from a chemical imbalance or a mechanical misalignment. Now we know that's true, but the dominant model is this key and receptor, where we have this key randomly bumping around the cell until it finds its receptor, unlocks the receptor, and biological action happens. Now we know that part is true, that key and receptor model, but it's the random bumping that we're starting to call into question. And that's where quantum biology comes into play. We are trillions and trillions of cells, and each one of these cells completes hundreds and thousands of tasks each second. Mathematically, that's impossible in that random collision model. And that's where quantum biology comes in and explains things in a much more efficient and really eloquent way.
All right. Well, thanks for that explanation. And you also, so you mentioned earlier too about the state of mind. You said the state of mind influences the cells and the mitochondria. So like you said, it just goes beyond the chemical, the physical. So how big of a role did that and just quantum biology, all this that you're talking about, how big a role did it play in overcoming Hashimoto's and overcoming ulcerative colitis and Lyme disease?
I think it played a foundational role. And that's why I'm so excited to talk about it and teach about it now, because in school, I was looking for a supplement protocol, an herbal protocol, an acupuncture treatment. I was looking for all these things, but I didn't realize that my body, our bodies, are regulated by the rising and setting of the sun. And if that is misaligned, then thousands of biological processes in the body are misaligned. I didn't realize the immense therapeutic value of having my body come in contact with the ground, the natural dirt beneath my feet, or being out in nature and being immersed in negative ions or the flow of that energy. It just became this incredible awakening. And I think, Dr. Eric, I think that it's really important to recognize that this was a checklist, right? When I first did this, it was like, okay, I got to do this, I got to do that, I got to do this. Same thing with my patients, right? They receive this checklist, but that checklist soon becomes a relationship with the world around us. And so now I feel a sense of safety and belonging when I see the sunrise, when I am able to be out in nature, that return, that embrace that the natural world offers is this sense of safety and belonging that many of us don't find in our everyday lives, right? This rush to be productive and produce and that grind that we experience in modern day life. Nature is an incredible antidote to that. And I think standing in that flow of energy that the natural world offers is foundational to health. And so that's why I talk the way I do.
All right. Yeah, no, that's wonderful. I mean, I definitely think there's a time and place for the mechanical and chemical model.
Yeah.
I mean, I recommend diet, lifestyle, supplementation, functional medicine tests, but there are a lot of people that hit roadblocks in their recovery and they try to fix it by just adding more supplements or just doing more testing. And again, sometimes I'm not saying that's not necessary. Sometimes we do need to dig deeper. But again, you mentioned the three pillars, which you in your interviews, and you mentioned it here too. You mentioned earlier coherence, which is one, and then the grounding in the sunlight. So if someone incorporates those three in combination, let's say, with the mechanical chemical model, maybe even by itself, I mean, it can make a profound difference in a person's health and a person's recovery. And it sounds like in your case, it made a world of difference.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I don't think it negates that model at all, right? The chemical mechanical model has produced such an incredible paradigm in health. It's given us so many answers and tools for our health, but it sometimes doesn't go far enough, right? We have those patients that hit those roadblocks, like you said. And I absolutely use supplements and lifestyle and diets and testing, absolutely. But to really place a person back in the context of the natural world, it is free, it's accessible, and it can be really powerful.
Yeah, definitely agree. Do you mind talking a little bit more about these pillars? Let's start maybe with grounding. Just, I mean, most people probably are familiar with it, but for those who aren't, maybe talk about it. And then how do you ground? Like, what do you do on a regular basis?
Yeah, absolutely. So grounding is just the idea of coming in physical contact with the surface of the earth or with something that's embedded in the surface of the earth, like a tree, placing our hands on the tree or putting our bare feet on the ground. Or, we're doing this interview as we enter into winter, and sometimes that can be really uncomfortable or just not feasible in the climate. And we can use grounding shoes. We can use fabrics that are conductive, like wool or silk, linen. But basically what we're doing is the surface of the earth has a net negative charge, and our cells run on a net negative charge as well. And we can build up a positive charge. And when we come in contact with this sea of free electrons that is lining our earth, what happens is our body is able to get some of that electrical charge and also dissipate some of that positive charge. You know, when we're looking at biochemistry, we're kind of looking at this flow of electrons in the body. And I wish I knew that when I was in organic chemistry, balancing all those equations, right? Because really that's what we're talking about in biochemistry. We're talking about whether something is oxidized and electron deficient, right? And we know about oxidative damage and the association with inflammation, or whether something is reduced and it has a lot of electrons and it can donate electrons to something that's oxidized or, you know, in that state of inflammation, and kind of quench that inflammation. And that's what we see with grounding. And grounding not only has that relationship with the negative charge of the earth, but it also has a relationship with the geomagnetic field of the earth. So we're coming in contact with this very, very weak magnetic field. It's 0.1 hertz, right? So it's a very low frequency magnetic field, but it is entrained with our blood flow, our heart rate variability, our breath. It's just an incredible relationship we have when we come in contact with the surface of the earth. And it helps us decrease inflammation. It decreases tension. It helps shift us to a parasympathetic rest and digest state rather than that sympathetic dominant, fight or flight state that so many of us are in. And it helps us realign our neurological function, our mood, our immune system, our sleep quality. It's really profound.
And so ideally you want to do it outdoors if you can, but like you said, if because of whatever reason, the weather, let's say, you could just get grounding shoes or a grounding mat and you could do it inside. And I mean, you could do both also. You could go outside for a little bit each day. And I don't know if this is what you do. I don't know if you go spend time outdoors, but then when you're inside, are you always using grounding shoes or a grounding mat, or is it just for a certain period of time during the day?
That's a good question. The way I've set it up, my Wi-Fi router is actually outside. And so I unplug it at night. So in order to kind of start my professional day with contact to the outside world, right, I have to plug in that Wi-Fi router. So I combine that with a little morning routine where I go out, I ground, I do a little bit of a heart coherence exercise. I move my body, get my lymphatics going, and then I will plug in the Wi-Fi and resume daily life, right? Normal modern life. But I think it's really important for me to start the day that way. It is allowing me to sync with the circadian rhythm of the sun. And we know that almost every cell in our body has a circadian clock in it. And that means that thousands of biological functions are in sync with the rising and setting of the sun. And so getting out there in the morning, grounding, doing all these things is really powerful in the way it sets up my day and just my overall health.
If you are looking to do everything you can to save your thyroid, in addition to watching my videos on YouTube, you also might want to subscribe to my free online newsletter, which is called Healthy Gut, Healthy Thyroid. Not only will you get the latest news on how to heal your gut and restore your thyroid health, but during each edition, I'll demonstrate a different blood or functional medicine test marker that relates to healing your gut and or your thyroid. There will also be an Ask Dr. Eric section where not only can you see questions that other people have asked related to gut and thyroid health, but you can also submit a question for me to answer in a future edition. To subscribe to the Healthy Gut, Healthy Thyroid newsletter, please visit SaveMyThyroid.com/newsletter. So getting now to the sunlight, how much exposure do you recommend to get in the morning as well as during the sunset, like 5 minutes or 15 minutes? Or?
Yeah, it really isn't that long. And so when we're out there watching sunrise, we're exposed to so much red and infrared energy, and it sends this signal of safety to the nervous system. But when that sun comes up about 10 degrees over the horizon, we are getting a lot of blue light, a lot of ultraviolet A light. And what that is doing is it's going through our retina and it's signaling through our melanopsin in the back of our eyes, right? We have that layer of cells in the retina on the back of the eye, and it senses that light in our environment, that blue light in our environment, that ultraviolet A light in our environment, and it signals the release of dopamine, the release of serotonin, those kind of feel-good, motivated hormones. It signals the release of pregnenolone, which is the backbone for our sex hormones, steroid hormones like testosterone and estrogen and progesterone. It signals our so many different things, right? It's involved in our metabolism, our hormones, our immune system, our cortisol system, right? We're supposed to have that big burst of cortisol and then kind of let that wane throughout the day as it dips in the evening. And it really doesn't take that much time. So on a sunny day, 5 minutes is plenty. And on a day like this, I'm here in Oregon in the Pacific Northwest, a day like this, you probably need about 15 minutes because we're in a veil of clouds, and we will be for months now. But 15 minutes to do all of those things is really a wise investment, I would say.
Okay. And what do you say the person has to be like? Do they have to have minimal clothing, or can they go out with, especially if it's chilly, and they just, are they getting any benefit just to get exposure with your face and your eyes?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And some of my patients that I deal with are really sick and debilitated, right? And they're not going to go outside and ground barefoot, right? They go and open a window, right? And let that light in that way. Of course, it's ideal going outside, adding some grounding, like we were just talking about, but just getting that light in the eyes. And when I say that, I don't mean staring directly at the sun. I mean, just letting that natural light into your environment has those spectrums of light that cue all those biological signals and cascades in the body. So it doesn't have to be my morning routine. It can just be getting exposure of some kind to that natural light.
All right, wonderful. So grounding, sunlight, and coherence. So you said you do heart coherence exercises in the morning. Can you talk about what coherence is and what specifically you do?
Yeah, absolutely. The HeartMath Institute has done incredible research on the power of the heart to entrain our biology. So our heart has a very big magnetic field, the biggest magnetic field in the human body, hundreds of times bigger than our brain. And it actually has what is called the intrinsic nervous system. And it sends more neurological signals to the brain than the brain does to the heart. You know, we have this idea of this top-down organization where the brain is driving everything, but we see that the heart can actually entrain our biology. And heart coherence is this state of gratitude or awe or joy. And when we take some deep breaths and we get into this emotional state, we see that the heart entrains our neurological function. We are wired into our frontal lobe, able to make calm, rational decisions. We're not wired into the amygdalas, into that fear, fight, or flight response. And that state of heart-brain coherence entrains many other things in our biology as well. And really, all it is taking some deep breaths in the diaphragm, making sure that exhale is a little bit longer than the inhale, and coming into that heart center and focusing on a feeling of gratitude or awe, something that brings us a sense of amazement or awe. And those feelings can create this relationship or entrainment between the heart and the brain, and it ripples out throughout our biology. HeartMath Institute has done incredible research on this.
Yeah, I use the inner balance. And again, you don't have to use it. Like you said, you could just take deep breaths, incorporate deep breathing with that feeling of gratitude. Yeah. So like you said, all this is free, although you can spend some money to get like a grounding mat, grounding shoes, get the inner balance from HeartMath. I mean, you could, but you don't have to do that. You could just go outside barefoot. You could get some sunlight, do some deep breathing. So that's what's amazing about it. Like you said, there's no cost to do that if you don't want to spend any money. So yeah. And then also one of the things you mentioned that you do is something I do as well, which is to unplug the Wi-Fi at night. So you're trying to minimize your exposure to the EMFs, electronic pollution. So can you talk about that? Like, I think a lot of people still kind of underestimate the impact that has on our health. And so it's great for just doing what you're mentioning, the grounding, especially, that will help to mitigate some of the effects. But yeah, if you could talk about why they should consider unplugging the Wi-Fi at night and what else they could do to kind of minimize the impact, in addition to grounding as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we think of ourselves kind of from this quantum biological lens, we see that our cells run on a negative charge. Our cells communicate with electromagnetic frequency. We really can be seen as electrical beings. And non-native Wi-Fi can be a problem and act as an interference to that communication and normal biological function. Now, there's something called electrosensitivity, where people are experiencing headaches or fatigue or certain symptoms like this, but we know that it is affecting the water in our body. So the water in our body, when it comes against a surface like a cell membrane or fascia or organs, tissues of all kinds, it takes on a different structure. And this structure of water, Gerald Pollack and his team out of the University of Washington termed it exclusion zone or EZ water. And this EZ water has a negative charge and it's associated with health. And we know that Wi-Fi decreases that EZ water in the body. And so it just makes sense to mitigate that as much as we can. And this is, 2024, getting away from Wi-Fi entirely is pretty impossible for most of us. But I am so glad you brought up grounding, because I have a lot of people that listen to this and they think, okay, I'm in Manhattan. I am by a Wi-Fi tower all the time. I can't turn anything off. Even if I unplug my router, I'm still surrounded by this. And it's like, okay, I hear you. And the body is really intelligent. So grounding helps normalize that electrical charge in the body. And we have to remember that the body's very resilient. So mitigating it as much as we can, making sure that our phones are on airplane mode or turned off during the night. We can unplug routers. We can wire things, right? Ethernet, we can wire our computers and our phones when we're using them, so there's not that Wi-Fi signal. But remembering that grounding helps normalize that communication in the body and that function in the body is an important thing to remember.
Definitely agree with everything you mentioned. So thanks for sharing that. And so on another podcast episode, I heard you talk about quantum parenting. Mm-hmm. So talk about that, because that's, I think, unique. I mean, it was unique to me. I never heard of quantum parenting until I heard you have a conversation with someone else. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Definitely. When we're looking at this biological lens of quantum biology, we see that the light in our children's environment is really important, right? We talked a little bit about the circadian rhythm and how our body has circadian clocks. Our children are much more sensitive to this. A bright light within an hour of bed decreases their melatonin by 90%. I mean, that's just astronomical, right? That's a huge, significant decrease. And melatonin is that repair hormone. It's that sleep hormone. It's a master antioxidant. It's anti-inflammatory, and it's part of so many different biological cascades. So quantum parenting is just kind of applying the principles of quantum biology to our relationship with raising our children. So making sure that they are syncing with the sun, right? Making sure that they're blocking some of that blue light that tells our body, hey, it's noon, when really it's 9 o'clock at night. And applying that to how we raise our children, making sure that they're getting out in nature, making sure that they're grounding, making sure that nature is a relationship we foster, because nature can really help hold some of the traumas and adversities that our children are facing in the modern world. And I think, there's so much science, and we could talk for hours about that. But I think the bottom line is, as parents, this idea of heart coherence, when we're in that state of heart coherence and gratitude and presence, it is infectious, it's contagious. It pulls our children into that state of heart coherence. And we are really a safe harbor for our children. And if we can be present and maintain as well as we can that state of coherence, that state of curiosity and love and compassion with our children, the safer they will feel. And we know as physicians that our cells don't heal if they're in a sense of danger, right? They have to have that sense of safety. And we as parents can offer that to our children. And it doesn't mean that we are perfect, right? It doesn't mean that we never experience frustration or anger. When we do that, it's important that our children witness that and witness how we work through that, right? So when I get angry or sad, my children know. And so if they say, is something wrong? I say, no, nothing's wrong. That kind of erodes our relationship, right? They feel something's wrong. So I say, yeah, I'm upset, and I'm taking a second to kind of let go of this because I'm upset about da-da-da, or just I'm upset, right? If it's not appropriate to go into it with them, I just say I'm upset, and I'm trying to let that go. And that builds that coherence and that bond between us, and creates that safe harbor that our children so desperately need these days.
Definitely agree. And then going back to where they need to get out in nature, we just don't see that nearly as much. I remember when I was a child and teenager, I was outside all the time. As a kid, I was outside playing in the dirt, on the grass. So getting both the grounding, even though I didn't know I was grounding at the time, but I was grounding and just getting the sunlight. And now, unfortunately, we see not everyone, but still, honestly, it's rare. I see people, not that I don't see kids playing outside. I shouldn't say that. But like I said, it was very common because when I was a child and teenager, there weren't phones and like smartphones and all these devices. So really, it was just a matter of children staying inside the house and doing nothing, or going out and playing. And now, unfortunately, a lot of children are inside and on their devices. And like you said, that dramatically affects, I didn't realize how much it affects melatonin production. You said 90% decrease in melatonin, which is, that is really bad. So yeah, that alone should be a reason to encourage your children, at the very least, to minimize the electronic use before going to bed. Ideally, at least an hour, if not a couple of hours before going to bed. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Yeah.
No, wonderful. Can I ask how you're doing these days with your, I dealt with chronic Lyme disease. Again, I can't say it was debilitating. When I dealt with it, I did have some neurological symptoms and what was scary, but I was able to overcome it. And again, Lyme is one of those things. I think once you have it, you have it. So I don't think it's gone from my body. I think I'm just learning to live in harmony with the chronic Lyme. And I don't feel like I have chronic Lyme, even though, again, I'm sure I do still have it in the body. And then I dealt with Graves' disease. And so I dealt with a different autoimmune thyroid condition. But so you dealt with Hashimoto's, chronic Lyme. I know ulcerative colitis could be really bad. So, I mean, yeah, can you give an update on your health? How are you doing with these conditions 16 years later?
Yeah. I'm symptom free, but like you said, it's I sort of say it's part of my deck of cards, right? So if I can summon it back if I don't sleep well, and mostly it's the stress, right? So I've only had sort of a recurrence in the symptoms in those 16 years due to stress. And
Yeah.
so I know it's part of my deck of cards, but thankfully I am symptom free.
That is awesome. And yeah, hopefully you continue to remain symptom free. And before we wrap up, Dr. Catherine, anything else that I should have asked you that I didn't ask you, or anything else that you wanted to mention?
No, I think that you did a wonderful job helping us navigate through some of these more heady topics, but it's really comes down to some common sense things. So thank you so much for having me on, and thank you for leading us through that conversation.
Yeah, you are welcome. Again, thanks for joining us. And can you let everyone know where they can find out more about you?
Definitely. I'm Dr. Catherine Clinton, and that's my website. That's my handle on Instagram and YouTube and Facebook. And I just love to share this information. I have a lot of free resources on my website, and I'm always talking about this. So would be happy to continue the conversation.
All right, awesome. We'll definitely include the link to your website and social media in the show notes. And again, I set up some great expectations. I thought it was a fascinating conversation. I hope everybody listening thought it was fascinating as well. Thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation, Dr. Catherine.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on.